Hey everyone, it's Melissa. Welcome back or welcome to Honeybee's Hangout. As usual, I hope you're having a great day. Hope your weekend was great. This week has been weird for weather, in the States at least. And I just want to take a minute to put out there that if you've been affected by that, if you have loved ones that have been affected by that, I hope you're safe. I hope you're taking care of yourselves. I hope you're taking care of each other. Because that's all we can do as human beings is to take care of each other the best that we can. And my thoughts are definitely with all of you. Now, having said that, I have to move into this video, which is one that I have been talking about since my very first video. And it is one that I knew I wanted to make before I even started this channel. And that is a video where I talk about my mental health journey. And I'll be honest, I have already tried recording this twice today. And it has gotten very long and kind of wordy. But so I feel like maybe what I'm going to wind up doing is breaking it down into multiple videos. Maybe a background video and then some specific videos in terms of for instance, this last year and COVID and coping with COVID when you have mental health issues. But part of why I think I wanted to do it over the weekend. I thought I would sit down and I would give myself lots of time. But every time it came up where I was in my head where I was oh, I should sit down and start recording, it made me feel I don't know, I panicked a little bit. It started to feel kind of overwhelming because even though my heart wants to make this video, no question. And I have multiple reasons for that. It's 2021, and there's still a stigma attached to mental health. And it's ridiculous because we have the science. This isn't the 50s or 60s in a mental hospital, a state mental hospital, where people are grasping at straws trying to figure out what's wrong with people. It's not. We know now. There's been enough research. There are scientific studies where they've done MRIs of the brain of people who live with anxiety and depression, and other types of mental illness, and you see that the brain works differently. They're just born like that. We are just born like that. It's not, it's not anything that we're doing wrong. It's not. I've heard, I've known people with depression who have had family members and friends that just say that they're lazy because they don't want to do certain things. And it's how do you do that in 2021 with the plethora of science that's available to you, that depression is a thing, and that it is a chemical thing. It's not them deciding that they don't want to do things. So I think the more people that speak out, the more people that tell about their journey and tell their truth, the more you put a face on what this is, what mental illness is, and the more you normalize it. The other thing is remembering back to when I first started being aware of my own issues, and knowing that at that time in the 90s, there was no internet, there was no social media, there was no way to reach out and see if other people were going through the same things, and nobody talked about it because it was so looked down on. So you did sort of, I mean, I did sort of go through it thinking that I was all alone, that I was the only one dealing with that, and what was wrong with me, and why couldn't I be normal. So that's another reason that I want to put this out there, is because maybe not this week, maybe not next week, maybe a year or two from now, somebody's going to come across this video, and they'll think, hey, that's just like me. You know, they'll be going through their own journey, and they'll be like, hey, she went through what I'm going through. So I have so many reasons why I want to do this. But then there's that part in my head that's like, what are you thinking? Like you're just putting this out there for everyone. You're just like, you're gonna make yourself this vulnerable to people. And that got scary, every time I would think of that. So I kept putting it off. And then, like I said, today I've already tried twice, but realized there was just no way to do a concise video on such a huge topic, which is why this third time I'm going to sort of change it up, and try to stop at a certain point and then break it down a little bit. So I guess in order to start, I have to talk about how I knew that I had. Let's do this. So my actual diagnosis is generalized anxiety disorder, and major depressive disorder, which recurring, which means it goes away and then it comes back. It's like the gift that keeps on giving. So those are my diagnoses, and there is an element of social anxiety to my issues. A lot of times people don't realize that there is, because particularly now I'm getting better at faking it. Which sounds ridiculous and sounds like probably unhealthy and like you shouldn't do that. But sometimes you have to fake it till you make it. So just you have to pretend that you're not a ball of nervous energy all the time. But in my case, I was like a shy child, like a super shy child, painfully shy, that had some negative experiences because of that, and in that became like a socially awkward adult. But I'll talk about that more later on. But when I first realized I had a problem, what led to it, I was 17 years old. I was in my junior year of high school, which I don't know if people outside of the US say like junior and senior. It would have been like year 11, my 11th year. I had lost someone that I was really close to. My great aunt, her name was, well, her birth name was Gladys. She preferred Clara. That's a long story. But when my mom was little, she couldn't say either of those things. So she used to call her Ta, and that's what she became, Aunt Ta. And her husband, who's my great Uncle Frank. My Aunt Ta was my grandmother's sister. And I did not know my mother's parents at all. They passed away within a month of each other, 6 weeks of each other, when I was 18 months old. So I just don't have any memories of them. I have some memories of my father's mother, but she passed when I was in the second grade. Like I think I was still 7. It was like 2 days after Christmas, and then my birthday would have been in February, so 7. And then my father's father moved to North Carolina to live with his brother and sister, so I didn't see much of him after that. So my Aunt Tad and Uncle Frank, for all intents and purposes, they were my grandparents. They did the things for me that grandparents do. For a lot of my childhood, I spent more time with my aunt than my mom, because my mom had to work full time to support us. So when I was really little, before I went into like daycare, preschool, I was with my aunt every day. And then I went into preschool. And then when I got to elementary school, first grade, I would go to my aunt's every day after school for 5 or 6 years, until I was old enough to stay home by myself and keep an eye on my little brother. But my mom was also very close to her, so we would go there every night for dinner. We would go on Sundays, every single Sunday, for dinner. We took them, like, they didn't have they had a car when I was really little, but my uncle was a horrible driver. Like, he's a horrible driver even before he got older and got sickly. And then he got diabetes, and he did not take care of himself. So he started getting like neuropathy in like his feet and his hands. And his driving just got worse. So there came a point where my mom got a car and she would just drive them everywhere. So we took them, grocery shopping and everything like that. So they were a part of my life, like every single day of my life for 16 years. And then my aunt passed away, and she was in the hospital for like a week. And she passed December 29th, 1994. And I didn't know what to do. I was 16 years old, and I lost like my best friend. And I tried to push through it. I tried to, help my mom with taking care of my uncle. And there's a third sister. Her name was Angie. She, I think that she was born with, it's like I don't know if it was, I don't think that it was cerebral palsy, but it was some sort of palsy. And as she got older, she couldn't walk at all. Like, she could walk some when she was young, and then she reached a point where she couldn't walk at all. But there's something wrong with her mind. Like, she was a steel trap, that woman. But my mom, I wanted to help her, so I tried to like help her take care of them. And I tried to maintain school. And then I got to like the spring of 1995. I was 17. And I just sort of, I lost the thread. Like, I just couldn't push myself anymore. I couldn't pretend that I was okay. And I hated, like, I felt so guilty for it, because my mom was struggling because she had been super close to my aunt. And then, like, having the responsibilities of, like, having to take care of the people that were left behind when my aunt passed, and having 2 kids and having a full-time job. And so I hated, like, feeling like I was an inconvenience. But it just sort of happened. And the way I realized that it was a legitimate problem was that I used to get a hold on subscription to 17 magazine, and that spring, it was like May or June, April or May or June, there was an article in that month's edition of the magazine that was on depression. And here are the signs that you might be depressed. And it was me, like it was everything I was going through. So I took it to my mom, and we ultimately went to just my family doctor, and he prescribed me at that time Zoloft. But that was the start of sort of a really long journey. So I was 17 then. I'm fixing to be 43 on Friday. And I'm still on that journey. Like every single day is part of that journey. So it's almost like never ending. But back then, it almost felt like it should be, right? Like it felt like I wanted to, like I had this idea of being like cured, which is just freaking stupid. Like I just wanted to be normal. I wanted to know, like, why me? Why do I have to be so screwed up? And I had this idea, like I would take the medicine and then I would get better and then I would be normal. It took me a really long time, like a lot of years, probably to my late 30s, so 20 to 25 years, to figure out that that was not the start of my problems. When I first got into therapy, 2016, I want to say, about 5 years ago. So when I first got into therapy, where I live now, one of the things that I finally had to admit to myself was, it's multiple things. One was how debilitating my anxiety was, how much I had prevented myself from achieving in my life, because I was anxious and afraid, and didn't know any coping skills, didn't have any idea how to deal with it. So I would just get more and more and more anxious, and eventually I would just shut down. And then also, one of the things was like looking back and thinking about how, like, in all honesty, how long had this been going on? And the truth is, I remember feeling anxious, worried, not very comfortable in my skin all the way back, like as far as I can remember, so 3 or 4 years old. And I actually, growing up, even to my own parents, like my own parents will say it, I developed a reputation for being really difficult as a child. I was very emotional. I sulked a lot. I cried a lot. I would like argue a lot. I was not a warm and fuzzy child. And it wasn't until I was in my late 30s looking back at my life that I realized that, like, I was a ball of anxiety every single day of my life from childhood. Like, I think, like, I had trouble making friends. I never, I never had like super close friends when I was a kid. I didn't make any like close friends until high school. And then when I went into that period of after my aunt passed with the anxiety and the depression, and I dropped out of school and got my GED. Back then we wrote letters because there were no, you couldn't text. There was no email. People didn't have internet in their house. So when I wrote letters to all of my high school friends and told them what happened and what I went through and that I had left school, none of them wrote back. One friend, I have one friend that was my best friend in high school that is still my friend now. And that was like, Jesus Christ, like it made me like never want to tell anyone what happened to me, because I had like, I mean, I'm talking a friend group of like 10 people, 8 to 10 girls. And one was like, okay, like, and continued to stay friends with me for years. And then my mental health issues caused some issues between us, but then I found her again on Facebook, and we've been friends ever since, and she has amazing kids that I love. But that first, like, what that did to my self-esteem and like my self-worth, that like I wrote these letters and poured my heart out to these girls I thought were my friends, and they never bothered to respond. That was like devastating for me and heartbreaking. And it's one of those things where like I've never wrapped my mind around it, and I can't imagine like if the shoe had been on the other foot that I would have ever done that to them. But here we are, you know. But yeah, I always struggled to make friends. I never dated, like, and that's a whole can of worms. I've never, and it all boils down to like there's this joke, they joke, because I went away to college for like 1 week, and then I like couldn't handle the anxiety of it and of being so far from home, so I came back, and I think I get a lot, like I know I get a lot of grief for things like that. But it's just because I was never able to admit to myself what my anxiety was doing to me. I think I felt like a burden. Like I didn't want people to know there was all this stuff wrong with me. Because I was like, oh, everybody has their own crap to deal with, and they don't need to deal with my crap too. So I just kept it all bottled inside. But then what happens to me when I do that is, you know, like fight or flight response, like when you feel like you're in danger and your adrenaline is just going and going and going. So when you have like this terrible chronic anxiety and your adrenaline is going and going and going all the time, eventually your body can't handle that anymore. And you shut down. And that's what happens to me. I push and push and push for as long as I can. And then that adrenaline from the anxiety builds up, and then I shut down, and that's when I have the depressive periods. So I have a really great therapist now where we're working on maybe we don't let that adrenaline and anxiety build up. And I'll talk about that because because like I said, I'm going to break this down. So I will talk about that in the second part of the video, or like the second video, because I've had to learn a lot of like coping skills during COVID, because it's been like anybody that has any sort of mental health issues, it's been so much worse during COVID. And there are people that never had issues before that are so overwhelmed by COVID that they have them now. So you've got to develop like how you're going to deal with it. But I wanted to get into the backstory first of how long I've lived like this with anxiety and depression, and how I found out. And it's, you know, it is what I just always say, like, it is what it is. It would have been great, probably, for my life if I had grown up in a different time. If I grew up in the 2000s instead of the 80s. If I grew up in a time where there was less of a stigma against mental health. There's not no stigma, it definitely exists, but less of one. And maybe more knowledge on how do you help a child that's going through that, that's an anxious child, so that that child doesn't become an anxious adult. But it just, it doesn't do me any good to dwell on that aspect of it. I can't rewrite time. I can't rewind the clock and take the knowledge that we have in 2021 and take it back to 1987. Like, I just can't do any of that. Coming to that knowledge, though, did have like one, because I always thought, like, I was one of those people, like, I internalized everything. So when I talk about like the fact that I was anxious and I worried and I stressed out all the time, and then social, when I didn't say too much about the social anxiety aspect, but there is the aspect of the fact that for some reason I was a painfully shy child. My brother has always been super lovable and super outgoing, but people terrified me, and I was super duper shy. And I had a lot of negative experiences with certain things, being teased, and sometimes being teased by people that really should have supported me. But that's just the way it was back then. And then, like, in school, people thinking I was like a weirdo, because I didn't really, I didn't talk, I didn't socially interact so much. I was awkward at like parties. I wasn't like in extracurricular activities because I just didn't know. It's like I didn't know how to socialize with people. I just felt like a freak all the time, like a weirdo all the time. So I kind of like grew up thinking that being the way that I was when I was younger was like I was a bad person, right? Like I stressed people out, and I hurt people's feelings, and it was all my fault. And it was like Melissa the bitch was the thing, sort of who I felt like I was, and I think how other people felt that I was for years, like years and years of my life. And it's only in these last 4 or 5 years of being in therapy, like I go every week, being in therapy, doing the work, finding out, like, yeah, this anxiety is a huge freaking deal. And it colors every aspect of my life, and it has for my entire life. That I can now look at like younger me, elementary school, high school me, and how I behaved back then and be like, that's not who I was. Like, I can let go of, okay, I can't change it. I can't go back and treat people differently. All I can do is to explain, like, this is who I was. This is why I acted the way I did. It was, I was afraid and anxious all the time. I had this underlying like low grade depression all the time. I was never happy. And it made it really difficult for me to function like a normal child or teenager, and do things like go to parties and all of that because of these issues. And I'm really sorry if you were one of the people that I hurt during that time. If I could change it, I would. But you know what? Maybe I wouldn't, to be perfectly honest. I I never want to say like, oh, I hurt that person, and if it were up to me, I would change it so that I didn't hurt that person. Um, because I feel like that's what you're supposed to say. Um, but to be honest, like I am who I am now, um, because of the journey that I went on. So I'm kind and compassionate and open minded. Um, I try really hard to understand other people and to be there for other people, that I see are going through these types of things, because I feel like there weren't a whole lot of people that were there for me for a lot of years. Like I feel like I got blamed more so than supported by a lot of people. Um, and so that's why I want to do things differently. Like I try really hard to make excuses for people, even when other people say you shouldn't be making excuses for them. But the reason that I do it is because sometimes I wish people would have made excuses for me. Like I want to try to be understanding. I want to give everybody a chance to show me who they really are. Um, I think you can tell who people really are. Like you're outside, how you portray yourself in like a group or whatever, it's not always who you really are. For me, like at work, who I am when I'm in a work setting is not who I really am. I hide a lot because I'm afraid if I act like myself that people are going to think I'm weird, that they're going to like withdraw from me again. So I pretend to be more average than I actually am. Um, so there is still that element of like wearing a mask around certain people or in certain events. Um, so I feel like when I interact with people, I kind of want to be like, I don't want to be somebody you feel like you have to wear a mask in front of. If you're a person that lives with any sort of mental health issues, particularly like anxiety and depression, because that's what I understand most, because that's what I live with. I want to be the type of person that can overlook the weird ish that you do because of like, okay, I have some friends and family members that have terrible chronic anxiety, the same as me. And at this point, because they are people that I love and they are people that I spend a lot of time with, I'm fully aware of who they are versus what is their anxiety. Like I I see them act in a certain way and I'm like, yeah, that's an anxiety thing. But that's not who they are as people. That if you take the time to look past those traits that you have because you have an anxiety disorder or because you have social anxiety, if you take the time to look past that, these people are like worth knowing. The people that are like, I have a few people in my head right now, that are people that I love. They are people worth knowing. Um, they are some of the most fun people that I ever known. Um, And once you come to terms, like, once you come to terms with the fact that you have anxiety, and you stop hiding it and you put it out there for people, and you're like, yeah, this is me, and people know that about you, and then they can see the difference between, oh God, she's a bitch, and oh, she acts like that because something's making her anxious. And you can learn to tell the difference between who their anxiety is and who they are. So I feel like, but I feel like the only reason I am the way that I am now is because of the journey that I went on. And so I hate that I made life difficult for people. I hate that I stressed my mom out so much as a kid. I hate that people that were my friends in like later years of elementary school or in high school, that some of them I was like really crappy nasty to, and that they are not my friends anymore because of that. Like I don't, as I mentioned, I have like one friend from high school that I'm still close to. We've actually been talking a lot more since COVID, on like Messenger and stuff. So that's really great. I'm really excited about that. We share a love of Disney. So it's pretty much we talk about Disney several times a week, which is great because she's one of only two people I can do that with. The other is my cousin Katie. But sometimes it kind of sucks, like that I didn't maintain relationships throughout the years like that because I pushed a lot of people away because of my own anxiety and my fears. So I do hate that. I hate those things about it. But I can't say that I would change it because it's part of who I am now. And I think at closing in on 43, I think I'm a better person than I've ever been. I think I'm happier with me than I've ever been. But I don't know if I get to this place if not for the bad stuff. If everything had been smooth sailing, would I be the same person? And there's no way to know that, but my instincts tell me no. So I'm going to wrap up this part of the video, for now, and maybe make some dinner, and then maybe I'll start on the next part. But I want to thank you if you stuck with it the whole way through, for listening to my story. And I know obviously that I can't put everything from the last 40 years of life into one video. So if you have anything that you want me to talk more about, if you have any questions, I'm trying to be open. You can reach out. You can like email me or private message on Instagram, or if you feel safe doing it, you can just leave a comment below and I'll get back to you. But yeah, everybody take care of yourselves. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back later. Bye.